Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a world that vanished beneath the sea, a place of towering walls, brilliant minds, and secrets swallowed by the ocean. A civilization so advanced that even today, its name still echoes through history like a whisper in the dark: Atlantis. Now imagine this. Thousands of years ago, deep beneath the waters of the ancient world, there may have been a place no map can show today, a lost realm hidden by time and buried beneath the sea. Its people may have lived among astonishing architecture, remarkable knowledge, and technologies far beyond what we usually associate with the ancient past. They may have believed their city would last forever, strong, glorious, untouchable, and then everything was gone. Perhaps one morning they opened their eyes to a world collapsing around them, the ground trembling, the sea rising, the sky turning against them. Or perhaps they never woke at all. Perhaps an entire civilization disappeared in a single terrible moment, leaving behind no clear trace, only mystery. Today we call this place Atlantis, a name wrapped in wonder, myth, and endless speculation. But what was Atlantis really? Was it only a legend, told and retold across generations? Or was it something more? A real city, a real people, a real disaster? Was Atlantis simply imagined? Or was it a true civilization that lived, vanished, and was lost to history forever? Before the journey into the mystery of Atlantis truly begins, there is a small moment to pause. If stories like this spark curiosity, if lost worlds, ancient civilizations, and the quiet mysteries of history feel fascinating, consider subscribing to the channel and supporting the journey. There are many more stories waiting to be explored. Now, the story can begin. For thousands of years, humanity has stood beside the sea, watching the waves rise and fall, listening to the endless rhythm of water touching the shore. The ocean has always carried a strange feeling of mystery. Its surface moves with light and wind, but beneath it lies a world that remains mostly unseen. We already know some of what lives there: fish moving silently through the water, rock formations shaped slowly by currents and time, and sadly traces left behind by human hands. But the ocean has always been deeper than what can easily be seen. Far below the sunlight, in the colder, darker layers of the sea, there may be things that history has not yet uncovered. Some researchers and dreamers alike have wondered about a possibility. What if, beneath the weight of water and centuries, there rest the silent remains of an ancient civilization? A civilization that lived long before humanity learned to carefully record its own history. A place where people built cities, created knowledge, and believed their world would last forever. And yet, somehow, that world disappeared. If such a civilization truly existed, then somewhere beneath the ocean floor, its story may still be waiting to be discovered. And in many ways, this is where the real story begins. The name Atlantis is familiar to almost everyone. It has appeared in films, in games, and in countless novels. For many people, it feels like something from fantasy. But the origin of the story is far older and far more intriguing. Because the true beginning of Atlantis does not start in a movie or in a modern book. It begins with the words of a single man. A man whose ideas shaped the foundations of Western philosophy. Around the year 360 BCE, the Greek philosopher Plato wrote 2 dialogues. He called them Timaeus and Critias. Within these writings, almost as if mentioning a distant memory, Plato described a powerful civilization that existed beyond the known world, somewhere past the great ocean. But he did more than simply mention it. He described where this civilization was located, how its cities were built, how its people lived, and even the reason why their entire world was eventually destroyed. Yet Plato did not write about Atlantis like a storyteller crafting a legend. His words carried the calm precision of a philosopher, measured, thoughtful, and surprisingly detailed. And ever since those texts were written, more than 2,400 years ago, people have continued to read them. They have debated them, questioned them, believed them, and doubted them. Scholars, historians, and dreamers alike have searched for answers, and even today, no final answer exists. To understand why this mystery has lasted for so long, it is worth looking carefully at what Plato actually wrote, because the details in those ancient texts are far more fascinating than many people expect. So what exactly did Plato describe when he spoke of Atlantis? Was he describing a civilization that truly existed, or a story meant to teach a lesson? To understand this, we need to take a closer look at the Atlantis Plato described. According to Plato, Atlantis was located beyond the Pillars of Heracles, a name the ancient Greeks used for the gateway to the Atlantic Ocean. Today, that place is known as the Strait of Gibraltar. Plato wrote that Atlantis lay far to the west of those waters, somewhere in the vast Atlantic, and it was not a small island. He described it as a land so large that it could rival entire regions of the ancient world, a place immense in scale, powerful, almost like a continent rising from the ocean. But here, the story pauses for a moment, because an important question appears. Where did Plato get this information? Was it simply imagination, a philosophical invention? Plato himself suggests otherwise. He writes that the story came from a famous Athenian statesman named Solon. Solon, according to Plato, had once traveled to Egypt. During that journey, Egyptian priests told him an ancient story, one preserved in the records of their temples. These priests claimed that their archives contained knowledge far older than Greek history. And within those ancient records, there was a description of a powerful island civilization that existed long before the known cities of Greece. So the story, at least in Plato's telling, did not travel from rumor to rumor. It moved from record to record, from Egyptian temple archives to Solon, and finally to Plato's writings. But what exactly did those ancient records describe? That is where the mystery of Atlantis truly begins. According to the story preserved in Plato's writings, Atlantis existed around 9,000 years before his own time. 9,000 years. When we consider that Plato lived roughly 2,400 years ago, this would place Atlantis more than 11,000 years before today. To understand how unusual this claim is, it helps to imagine what the world looked like during that distant age. Humanity was still in its earliest stages. People lived in small groups, using stone tools as their most advanced technology, and agriculture had not yet fully begun. And yet, according to Plato's account, Atlantis was something entirely different. It was described as a powerful and highly organized civilization, home to vast cities rather than simple settlements. These cities were surrounded by enormous walls, divided by canals, and built in perfect circular rings. At the center of the island rose a great mountain, and at the summit of that mountain stood a magnificent temple dedicated to Poseidon, the god of the sea. According to legend, Poseidon himself had chosen the island long ago after falling in love with a mortal woman. Their descendants were said to have become the first rulers of Atlantis. At least, that is how the story begins. The people of Atlantis were described as skilled builders and craftsmen. They mined metals from the earth, worked with gold, and shaped copper into tools and ornaments. But Plato also mentions something even more mysterious, a strange metal called orichalcum. Today, no one knows exactly what this metal was. Some historians believe Plato may have been describing brass, an alloy of copper and zinc, while others think it may have been entirely symbolic, perhaps even mythical. In the story, however, this metal was considered second only to gold in value, and the walls of Atlantis were said to shine with it. The descriptions of Atlantis in Plato's writings are filled with striking imagery. He speaks of walls covered with a metal that shone with a color close to gold. When imagined beside the ocean, those walls must have reflected the light of the setting sun in remarkable ways, glowing along the shoreline as day slowly faded into evening. Atlantis, in these descriptions, was not only beautiful, it was powerful. According to Plato, the civilization possessed organized armies and formidable naval forces. Over time, its influence expanded across the seas, reaching far beyond its island home. The Atlanteans were said to control much of the Mediterranean world, extending their reach toward Egypt and across large parts of Europe. Their empire grew steadily, becoming one of the most dominant powers described in the ancient story. Yet eventually, Atlantis encountered resistance. In Plato's account, a much smaller civilization stood against this powerful empire. That civilization was ancient Athens. Despite the immense strength of Atlantis, the Athenians were said to have resisted their expansion and ultimately defeated them in war. But the story does not end with victory or defeat. Soon after this conflict, a great catastrophe is said to have struck both civilizations. Plato describes earthquakes, floods, and enormous waves rising from the ocean. In a single day and a single night of destruction, Atlantis disappeared beneath the sea. The island, once powerful and magnificent, was swallowed by the waters and lost. Plato recounts this moment with remarkable clarity, as though the event had been preserved in distant memory. The description is vivid, almost as if someone had once witnessed the disaster from the shores of the sea and recorded what happened. And this is where the story ends. But the real question begins. Why did Plato tell this story? Did he truly believe Atlantis had once existed? Or was the tale meant as a philosophical lesson? Some scholars believe the story was intended as a warning about pride, ambition, and the dangers of power without restraint. In that interpretation, Atlantis becomes more than a lost city. It becomes a symbol of how civilizations, when consumed by arrogance and the desire for domination, may ultimately bring about their own destruction. This possibility is worth considering. Plato was not only a recorder of stories, but one of history's greatest philosophers. Philosophers often express their deepest ideas not through direct statements, but through narratives and allegories. In that sense, Atlantis may not only represent a forgotten place in the distant past, but also a deeper teaching hidden within the story itself. And yet, while telling the story of Atlantis, Plato also provided remarkably specific details. He did not offer exact coordinates, but he described geographic locations, time periods, and elements of daily life within the civilization. He mentioned metals, agriculture, and the carefully organized structure of Atlantean cities. These details raise an interesting question. If the story were purely symbolic, why include so many concrete descriptions? This tension between myth and possible history has divided scholars for more than 2,400 years. Some historians are convinced that Atlantis was entirely fictional, nothing more than a philosophical narrative created by Plato. Others believe that the story may refer to a real place that existed somewhere in the ancient world. For those who consider that possibility, the search for Atlantis becomes a much larger adventure. Over the centuries, dozens, even hundreds of theories have attempted to identify its location. Some of these ideas are imaginative, while others are supported by historical and archaeological evidence. One of the most widely discussed theories suggests that Atlantis may actually refer to the island of Thera in the Aegean Sea, known today as Santorini. Unlike many other ideas, this theory is supported by real archaeological discoveries. To understand this theory, it helps to travel back in time to around 1600 BCE. During that period, one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history occurred in the Aegean Sea. The volcano of Thera erupted with extraordinary force, an explosion estimated to have been several times stronger than the famous eruption of Krakatoa. The island was shattered, enormous waves spread across the sea, and a powerful civilization suddenly faced devastation. That civilization was the Minoan civilization, a highly advanced maritime culture centered on the island of Crete. The Minoans dominated trade and navigation across the Aegean Sea, building prosperous cities and maintaining an impressive naval presence. Archaeologists studying the ruins of Thera eventually uncovered a remarkable site called Akrotiri. Beneath layers of volcanic ash, entire buildings were preserved in astonishing condition. Colorful frescoes remained on the walls, pottery stood intact, and everyday objects appeared almost untouched, as if the inhabitants had left suddenly, abandoning their belongings as they fled the approaching disaster. The Minoans were indeed powerful, sophisticated, and deeply connected to the sea. Their civilization suffered a dramatic decline following the volcanic catastrophe, which has led some researchers to wonder whether memories of this disaster might have survived through ancient stories. When certain details in Plato's writings are reinterpreted, the timeline begins to look surprisingly close. Plato wrote that Atlantis existed 9,000 years before his time, but some scholars have suggested that the number may have originally meant 900 years instead. If a translation or transmission error occurred between Egyptian records and Greek texts, the timeline would move much closer to the era of the Thera eruption. Of course, the theory is not perfect. Santorini lies within the Mediterranean world, not beyond the Pillars of Heracles as Plato described. The geography does not fully match his account. Even so, many researchers consider this explanation one of the most reasonable attempts to connect Plato's story with a real historical event, Other theories look in completely different directions. Some researchers have suggested that Atlantis might have been connected to ancient civilizations of Central America, linking the story to the distant ancestors of the Maya or the Aztecs. According to this idea, Atlantean explorers may have traveled across the Atlantic Ocean and established colonies along the western shores. Supporters of this theory sometimes point to similarities between pyramid structures found in Egypt and those built in Mesoamerica. Why would two civilizations on different continents create such similar monumental designs if there had been no connection between them? It is an intriguing question, but one that remains unanswered. The available evidence is simply not strong enough to confirm such a link. And then there is perhaps the most mysterious possibility of all, that Atlantis still lies somewhere beneath the ocean floor, hidden beneath layers of water and sediment, waiting to be discovered. For centuries, the search for Atlantis remained mostly a matter of imagination and speculation. Ancient texts were studied, maps were examined, and explorers dreamed of discovering a lost civilization somewhere beyond the horizon. But for most of human history, the oceans themselves remained largely unexplored. The depths of the sea were mysterious, dark, and unreachable. Only in the last few decades has technology allowed scientists to truly begin exploring the ocean floor. With advanced sonar systems, deep-sea submarines, and satellite mapping technologies, researchers have started to reveal landscapes that were hidden beneath the water for thousands of years. Vast mountain ranges, deep trenches, and even the ruins of ancient coastal settlements have slowly come into view. These discoveries have led some researchers to wonder whether traces of Atlantis could still be hidden somewhere beneath the ocean. After all, during the last ice age, sea levels were far lower than they are today. Large areas of land that were once above water now lie beneath the sea. Entire coastlines disappeared as the glaciers melted and oceans slowly rose. If an advanced coastal civilization existed in those distant times, its cities could now rest on the ocean floor, buried beneath layers of sediment and time. Some underwater structures discovered in recent years have sparked debate among researchers. While many of these formations are natural geological features, a few have raised intriguing questions about whether ancient human activity might once have taken place nearby. For now, however, Atlantis remains a mystery. No city has been discovered that clearly matches Plato's description. No ruins have been found that can be confidently identified as the legendary island civilization. And yet, the possibility continues to fascinate scientists, historians, and explorers alike. Because the oceans still cover more than 70% of our planet, and much of that vast underwater world remains unexplored. Somewhere in those silent depths, beneath thousands of meters of water, the past of our planet may still be waiting to be uncovered. Over the years, several underwater discoveries have reignited the debate about Atlantis. One of the most discussed examples is the so-called Bimini Road, located near the Bahamas in the Atlantic Ocean. Divers exploring the area in the late 20th century discovered long rows of massive stone blocks resting on the seafloor, arranged in a pattern that resembles an ancient road or wall. Some researchers believe these stones are simply natural formations created by geological processes over thousands of years. Others argue that the structure appears too organized to be entirely natural, suggesting that it might be the remains of an ancient harbor or coastal structure that once stood above sea level before the ocean rose. Similar mysteries have appeared in other parts of the world as well. Near the coast of Japan, researchers discovered a large underwater formation known as the Yonaguni Monument. Massive stone terraces, stair-like structures, and sharp angles can be seen beneath the water, leading some to believe that it may have once been shaped by human hands. Most geologists, however, explain these formations as natural rock structures shaped by earthquakes and erosion. Yet the debate itself reveals something important. The ocean still hides many secrets, and our understanding of ancient civilizations continues to evolve as new discoveries are made. It is also worth remembering that ancient myths often preserve fragments of real events. Many cultures around the world tell stories about great floods, lost lands, and cities swallowed by the sea. These legends may not describe Atlantis directly, but they suggest that dramatic changes in sea levels and natural disasters have shaped human history more often than we might imagine. In that sense, the story of Atlantis may represent more than a single lost city. It may reflect humanity's collective memory of a time when the world itself was changing, when rising oceans and powerful natural forces transformed the landscapes where early civilizations once lived. And so, the mystery of Atlantis continues to drift through history, somewhere between legend and possibility. For more than 2,000 years, philosophers, historians, explorers, and dreamers have returned again and again to the same question. Was Atlantis a real civilization that vanished beneath the sea, or simply a story meant to teach something deeper about human nature? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Ancient disasters, forgotten civilizations, and stories passed down through generations often blend together over time. A real event may slowly transform into a legend, while a philosophical lesson may become woven into the memory of history. Atlantis may represent both possibilities at once, a distant echo of a real catastrophe, and a powerful reminder of how even the greatest civilizations can rise, flourish, and eventually disappear. Today, the oceans still hold many secrets. Vast regions of the seafloor remain unexplored, hidden beneath layers of water and darkness. New discoveries continue to emerge every year, revealing traces of ancient coastlines and long-lost settlements that once stood above the waves. Each discovery reminds us that much of Earth's past is still waiting patiently beneath the surface. For now, Atlantis remains one of the most fascinating mysteries in human history, a story that has traveled across centuries, surviving in texts, debates, and imagination. Whether it was a real island kingdom or a philosophical warning about power and pride, its legend continues to invite curiosity. And somewhere in the quiet depths of the ocean, beneath endless waves and silent darkness, the answer may still be waiting. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoy stories of history and mystery, consider subscribing for more journeys into the past. And now, as the night grows quiet, allow the mind to rest and the world to slow down. Good night, and may peaceful dreams carry you gently through the mysteries of the past.